B-52s and B-52s are carrying out simulated nuclear bombing attacks right on North Korea's borders. They remember something from the past, so they're reacting in a very aggressive, extreme way. Well, what comes to the West from all of this is how crazy the North Koreans are. Yeah, they are, but there's a little bit more to say. Well, this is the way the world is going, and I don't have to talk about take, say, Spain. I mean, Spain is being devastated by economic policies which are totally mad. You know, I mean, it's perfectly obvious that you can't first of all, the Spanish problem was not what Spain was doing. Their budget was pretty much balanced in 2007. It's banks, which includes German banks because they do the lending. So the banks went crazy with the boom, and when everything busted, the population pays for it. Actually, I was just in Ireland, same story. The big Celtic boom, they called it, all bank shenanigans. It crashed. The government guaranteed all the losses of the banks. Government means the population, so the population pays off the banks, and they're doing fine, you know. And meanwhile, the population's suffering. Then the Troika comes in and says you have to carry out policies that are going to make it worse. Austerity under stagnation, that's no way to grow out of it. Well, you know, this is not a problem at the scale of destruction of the of existence, but it's a serious one. And these things, it's not that there are no alternatives. Sure, there are alternatives, but they're not being taken, and that's dangerous. So if you ask what the world is going to look like, it's not a pretty picture. Unless people do something about it, we always can. Easy to paint a pretty picture, you know, and maybe it's worth thinking about. Actually, one way in which the future could be is actually suggested by Barcelona. In 1936, there was some very significant developments took place in Spain. Not for the first time. They have a long history. They didn't come out of nowhere. There'd been years and years of thinking about it, working about it, experimentation, efforts that were crushed. But
you have a phone to do?
Yeah, I'll be in a second. But and it was a complicated development. You know, first of all, it was in the middle of a war. So, but until there was a social revolution, it was crushed within about a year. But during that 1 year, and it's crushed incidentally by the communists, the fascists, and the liberal democracies operating together. They didn't want it, but ended up in May Day in Barcelona and went on. But there was a development of self-governing, autonomous, free communities of a pretty impressive kind. There's some interesting literature about it. Interesting book called Of Collectivizations, just statements by small communities about what they were doing, which is very moving. I remember one by I read these things when I was a kid, when a town called Membria, I don't even know if it's still there, but it described what they were doing and said, Membria may be the poorest town in Spain, but it is the most just, you know, and they described what they were doing. And there were a lot of potential there, in Barcelona too. It was crushed, but it was a potential, and I think it gives a fleeting image of what a more free and just society could be like. And I think that's the kind of thing that's within reach. In the United States, for example, which is, well, right in Spain, for example, in the Basque Country, the Mondragon conglomerate is an indication of steps that can be taken towards a more free and democratic society. Make a lot of criticisms, but it's an important step. The Mondragon is now, there's some linkage being set up between Mondragon and the U.S. Steelworkers Union. It's one of the most progressive unions to work together on developing worker-owned enterprises and cooperatives in the Rust Belt, the area of the United States where the manufacturing industry has been destroyed by, again, by policies that were by no means necessary. And there are worker-owned enterprises developing, and these are steps towards a more free and just future, and there's many others that can be taken. But we're not going to get there unless we pay some serious attention to major problems, major threats that we face.